One of the most interesting stories of character development from the ancient world has to be that of how the young Gaius Octavian became Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Born in 63 BC from a rich but relatively minor aristocratic family, Octavian did not have a particularly easy time in his childhood. He lost his father when he was just 4 years old, being raised by his mother and his grandmother. He did not have a particularly good health, nor was he very strong or tall. Suetonius tells us that Octavian barely matched the minimum height requirement for a legionnaire of the time, being 5'8" or 173 centimeters tall. However, what he lacked in physical presence, he certainly made up for with a remarkable intelligence, excellent oratory skills, and a keen eye for politics. Octavian's first public appearance was in 52 BC, when he was just 11 years old. He gave a speech on the funeral of his grandmother, which captured the attention of a certain Julius Caesar. You might have heard of him. Caesar was his great-uncle, and he decided to invest on the young Octavian's development. Despite failing to join Caesar on his military campaigns due to his poor health, they developed a very strong bond, and Caesar ensured Octavian developed his talent for politics. He was grooming the young man to be one of his allies. In 45 BC, Caesar deposited a sealed will on the Temple of Vesta. In it, he proclaimed Octavian his legal heir and adopted son. Everything would change for Octavian when in 44 BC, Caesar, at the height of his power, was assassinated on the Roman Senate. Caesar's faction quickly rallied against the assassins and a civil war broke out. When his will was read, to the surprise of everyone, the young Octavian was the main beneficiary of his inheritance and declared his adoptive son. All of a sudden, the 19-year-old man was all of a sudden thrown in the center of the Roman political stage. And you know what it means to be at the center of Roman politics, right? It meant you had to pay for a lot of troops to defend your power, and you had to buy the allegiance of as many political supporters as you could, which meant you had to issue lots of coins to pay for all of that. So this is a nice clue for us to show the first coin of the day, and one of the first appearances of Octavian on coinage. We start our numismatic tour with a coin not of Octavian, but of Mark Antony. After the assassination of Julius Caesar, his power was shared between Mark Antony, the dictator's second-in-command, and Octavian, now his adopted son and legal heir, to unite themselves against the assassins. Antony, Octavian, and a third ally of Caesar, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, forged an alliance that would be known as the Second Triumvirate. This union was, at best, a tenuous, temporary alliance, as these men weren't really willing to share power, at least not for very long. Lepidus was a minor figure between the three and would quickly be pushed to the sidelines. The real contenders were Antony and Octavian. Antony, much older and experienced, clearly believed him the senior member of that team, and frankly, for everyone of the time, it looked like Antony had everything to become the first Roman emperor. Octavian, of course, did not see it that way. He was just 19, yes, but he was Caesar's legal heir, and he considered himself the rightful successor. This denarius, struck in 41 BC at Ephesus, demonstrates Antony's perceptions of the political iconography in this new regime. The coin has two portraits, and the portrait of Antony was meant to be on the obverse, reserved for the senior ruler, which Antony believed himself to be. This clearly shows that Antony had authority over the mint of Ephesus at the time, because I'm sure Octavian's officials would have never allowed such a coin to be issued under their watch. This is the first coin of a series of wonderful propaganda pieces where Antony and Octavian will try to justify their own right to rule and at the same time try to discredit the other, until Well, war was inevitably declared between them in 31 BC, a decade later. If it wasn't for their common enemies taking so long to be defeated, they probably would have gone to war earlier. So, as we can observe here, we see on the obverse the very characteristic portrait of Mark Antony, with his very unique, facial traits, prominent chin, and especially his very pronounced aquiline nose. I think it's his most typical feature. On the legends, it reads, Marcus Antonius, Imperator Augur, so commander of troops and priest. Then we have Triumviri res publicae constituende, which meant triumvir for the restoration of the republic. So, quite a serious title. After his name, we also have the name of the official responsible for the issue of these coins, a certain Marcus Barbatius Pollio. That was his name. And after it, his official positions, Questor pro praetorie. Heading to the reverse, we have the much younger portrait of Octavian. I mean, he was quite young when this coin was made. He was something like 22 years old. But still, here we see a very young, almost childlike image. A clear pinch on Mark Antony's part to show Octavian as his junior partner. We will see soon on the coins of Octavian that he picked a much more mature-looking portrait of himself. Despite his young appearance on the bust, Antony at least had the decency of putting all of his titles on the reverse as well. It reads Caesar, the name Octavian inherited from Julius Caesar, which he added to his official name, then Imperator Pontifex Tertius, commander of troops and priest for the third year, then Triumviris res publica constituende, once again, triumvir for the restoration of the republic. What an amazing coin. I'm sure if Octavian ever held one of these, he wouldn't have been very happy. He's like, why are you showing me like a kid? I'm supposed to be taken seriously. In contrast to that coin, now here we have a piece struck under Octavian's authority. This was struck in the very eventful year of 37 and 36 BC, when Octavian and his best friend and most trusted general, Agrippa, were conducting military operations in Sicily, managing to finally capture the island in 36 BC, and forcing Sextus Pompey, one of the last remnants of the faction that killed Julius Caesar, to flee east, where he was eventually captured and killed. Maybe the mint of Rome was too far away or did not produce enough coins to pay for the significant expenses of this invasion, because here we have a coin struck at a military mint, likely located somewhere on southern Italy, next to Octavian and Agrippa's troops, to supplement the coin production to pay for so many soldiers. On the obverse we have once again the young portrait of Octavian, although now we have a few visual touches added to give him a more adult look. First, the proportions of his head are a little bit more fitting of an adult, and secondly, he has a short beard, which had a dual meaning. First, it was meant to represent he was still in mourning for the death of Julius Caesar, because, you see, Romans were supposed to be clean-shaven, and only let a beard grow when mourning a loved one who just died. And secondly, of course, a beard was there trying to give him a more masculine appearance. I mean, he was around 27 when this coin was made. He was definitely not a boy anymore, but it's understandable he wanted to pass this image of someone more mature, as Mark Antony was very efficient on smearing his image, depicting him as maybe a bit too young for the responsibilities he held. Around the legends, we can read Imperator Caesar Divi Filius, so Commander Caesar, son of a son, son of the deified Julius Caesar. Then, Triumviri iterum res publicae constituende, triumvir for the second time in the name of the restoration of the Republic. Around this year, Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian renewed the triumvirate, the official name of their alliance. Hence, we have this iterum after the triumviri, showing he was holding this exceptional title of triumvir for the second time. And on the reverse, we have a display of Octavian's, shall we say, piety. We have 4 instruments used by a pontifex, the priest of Rome's main religious cult. It's not really that Octavian cared so much for his priestly duties, although he was part of the College of Priests, but this is more of a connection to Julius Caesar once again. Caesar held the office of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest, so by showing these implements, he showed a willingness to continue on Caesar's civic duties, to show proper reverence to the gods. Pietas, as the Romans called it, was one of the main virtues that had to be displayed by a proper Roman citizen. So here he's putting his pietas to full display. And we keep going forward in time. Now we have a peace struck between 32 and 31 BC. At that time, the triumvirate had broken down. Mark Antony and Octavian were in open hostilities, and the famous Battle of Actium would soon be fought, solidifying Octavian's control over Rome and the end of the Roman Republic. Here, we don't have a portrait of Octavian on the obverse, but rather another homage to Julius Caesar, with the portrait of the patron goddess of the Julii family, the goddess Venus. Quite a pretty portrait. She has her hair all nicely tied up. She also wears like a tiara and some earrings. Very charming. And the coolest part of this coin is the reverse. We have this fascinating full body image of Octavian. Now it's time for action. Preparations for war are underway, and Octavian simply cannot let that image of a young man linger on the public mind. He's shown here ready for battle, wearing his full battle gear, with a special emphasis to what he's wearing, a lorica musculata, a full metal breastplate, an incredibly expensive and exclusive piece of kit. Like it was a tailored fit piece of probably steel that covered his entire chest. And as you can think, it was something extremely exclusive, extremely expensive, and was probably reserved for generals and incredibly wealthy people. Anyways, he's holding his hand up as if calling his troops for battle. He's holding a spear and a cloak around his arm, and the cloak is being blown by the wind. Pretty dynamic. This looks a lot like the portrait of the god Virtus, the incarnation of masculine virtues, which would make perfect sense for Octavian's personal propaganda during these times. The legends are pretty simple. Caesar Divi Filius, Caesar, the son of a god. Of course, once again a reference to Caesar. I love this coin, it's spectacular. Not only I enjoy its clean, minimalist imagery, but of course this is a very emblematic coin. The Republic was doomed by that point. It was now a matter of who would become the first emperor, Octavian or Mark Antony. So, with the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra at Actium, Octavian was now the undisputed leader of Rome. In 27 BC, the Senate bestowed upon him 2 new titles, Princeps, the first citizen, and Augustus, meaning something akin to the illustrious, conferring him extraordinary powers no senator, consul, or dictator ever had. This effectively meant an end to the Roman Republic, although the institution, the Republic, never ceased to exist. It was never really abolished throughout the imperial period. But this new figure of disproportionately strong executive and legislative power, this imperator, this illustrious, with full command of Rome's armies, full command of the treasury, an unrestricted power of veto over any state decisions, well, he became something akin to a new monarch of Rome, despite Rome's disdain for the idea of being ruled by a monarch. You know, maybe you could call him a very strong president, but he was really more of a monarch. So for this coin, here he is, Octavian, now Caesar Augustus, the undisputed leader of the Roman world and the first Roman emperor. Coinage would suffer considerable changes by that time, with the iconography reinforcing his new special status amongst men. The most noticeable change is the introduction of a realistic but slightly idealized portrait of the emperor, with a portrait that never changed. He never seemed to age on his coins, always looking like this relatively young, idealized man that he was really not only a man. This was a symbol of power, a symbol of a powerful person who was ratified by the gods themselves. I mean, imagine someone who was born the same year as Augustus and lived as long as he did. Romans were used to depicting their aristocrats as older, mature men with wrinkles, respectable, with signs of experience. This was highly valued in Roman culture. So our hypothetical citizen would have looked at coins of Augustus and see this man who was born the same year as he did, but who never seems to age. Year in, year out, new coins would be made, bestowing upon him more and more imperial titles, signs of glory, telltales about his victories and exploits, while everyone else lived their lives, aging, wrinkling. Here's this other man on the coins, supposedly as old as he was, but never growing older. It might have been a bit uncanny, giving Augustus a slight air of him being out of this world, and this was done on purpose. Now, this denarius, struck between the years 20 and 16 BC, likely made at the city of Caesar Augusta on what is modern-day northeast Spain, has on the obverse this new, lovely type of portrait of Augustus, now wearing the laurel wreath, representing this new imperial authority he had, and in a way, replicating, once more, Julius Caesar, as Julius Caesar himself was, on his coins, shown wearing a laurel wreath. And of course, when he did it back in 44 BC, he caused quite a fuss. I mean, not only was he the first one to put a portrait of himself, a living Roman, on a coin, but he also showed himself with a laurel wreath, a symbol of military triumph and divine favor. Like, this was considered something of a madman back then. And there's this thing I love about these earlier coins of Augustus, this minimalism with the iconography. Romans loved to write a lot about themselves, and especially if they had coins, they would put a lot of written things on coins. Their family names, their accomplishments, official titles they had, but not on these ones. Augustus will explain who he is on the reverse, as we will see shortly, but first, he wants you to look at the obverse. He wants you to focus solely on his image. Like if he was saying something like, I'll explain who I am later when you spin the coin, but first I want you to take a long look at me and understand I am not to be messed with. And as we go to the reverse, then we have his new name. We read Caesar Augustus, and at the center we have two laurel trees. One of the ways the Roman Senate chose to honor Augustus was to plant two laurel trees at the entrance of his old house in Rome. Not only the laurel wreaths were considered a powerful charm and a symbol of divine favor, the entire tree was said to be sacred. It was also said that Apollo himself liked the tree and imbued it with his powers. The tree is still very prominent in certain superstitions of Mediterranean cultures. Actually, this reminds me of a personal story. I remember my grandmother, who came from this tiny little village in Portugal, putting a small laurel branch on my bedside and changing it every other week. And once I asked her, why you do that, Grandma? And according to her, it was to ward off any evil thoughts directed towards me. She was a staunch Catholic, though. I wonder what the local priest would have had to say about that habit of her. Alright, let's keep going. Now for this next coin, struck in 13 BC, Augustus, by then and with an unquestionable grip to power, celebrates the very competent people he had by his side, in particular his childhood friend and most trusted general, Agrippa. Due to his lackluster physical attributes, Augustus was not a great general nor a good soldier. We could argue that his ascension to power came mostly due to his genius political mind, maybe his ability to surround himself with loyal and competent people, like great generals and administrators, and maybe a little bit of luck. If the war between him and Antony would have been a mere competition of martial prowess, it's likely that Mark Antony would have won. So, on the obverse, this denarius follows the traditional formula for the coins of the time. Once more we have the bust of Augustus, now without the laurel wreath, and notice how he still looks the same age if compared to the previous coin. Despite this piece being made when he was already 50 years old, he looks more like someone in his early 30s. Around the bust, very simple legends. Caesar Augustus. Despite living to the ripe old age of 75, this frail health he suffered when he was still the young Octavian meant he could not accompany Julius Caesar on most of his military campaigns. So Augustus lacked the experience to lead troops into battle. Fortunately, he could rely on Agrippa for these more physically demanding military endeavors. He wasn't just a stronger man. Agrippa also became a very talented general. And here on the reverse, we have this beautiful scene of the two best friends sitting on top of an elaborate platform in some sort of official ceremony. Augustus knew how important Agrippa was, and to his credit, he displayed enormous gratitude to him, showering his friend with the recognition he deserved, being almost equal to Augustus in importance and majesty. The legends around the design don't make any reference to Agrippa or Augustus though, but to the Triumvir Monetalis, the public official responsible for the issuing of the denarius at the Mint of Rome. It reads, Claudius Sulpicius Platorinus. Sadly for Augustus, his dear friend Agrippa died just 1 year after this coin was made, sending Augustus on a frenzy, on a scramble to pick a successor, as he wanted Agrippa to be the next emperor. The case of Agrippa and Augustus is one of these beautiful cases of well-recorded friendships of the ancient world. Actually, leave me in the comment section if you have a friend you consider could be your quote-unquote personal Agrippa. You know, a trustworthy, competent friend who complements your personal weaknesses. Alright, one more coin of Augustus. Let's have a look at this denarius struck between 12 and 11 BC. This particular piece was once again struck at Rome, and it celebrates the expansion of Rome's territories under Augustus. To name a few, Augustus finished the annexation of northern Hispania, holding all of the Iberian Peninsula. He solidified Rome's control over the Alps. He advanced the Germanic frontier. He conquered Dalmatia and Pannonia at the Balkans. Of course, he conquered the rich kingdom of Egypt from Cleopatra, and reduced neighbors such as Judea, Cappadocia, and Galatia to client kingdoms that would soon be annexed by the empire. On the obverse, once again, we have the fairly standard formula. We have the portrait of Augustus looking to the right, and very simple legends. Augustus. Very good, strong strike in this coin. The portraits and the letters are all in very high relief. On the reverse, to represent all of these subdued peoples, we have a barbarian, humiliated, on his knees, looking up at a Roman standard in despair, as if asking Rome for clemency. Augustus will inaugurate a period of significant territorial expansion that will only stop like a century later under Trajan, when Rome will assume its gigantic territorial expansion. Think about it, the extension of the empire was insane. It went from the cold hills of modern northern England throughout all of continental Europe to like the deserts of Africa to the shores of the Tigris and the Euphrates in Mesopotamia as like this undisputed European superpower. Around the legends, this coin makes a reference to the Triumvir Monetalis once again, a certain Lucius Caninius Gallus. The barbarian on the coin looks like a Gaul with his long hair, so I wonder if the magistrate wanted to make a small joke between like the Gaul and one of his surname, Gallus. So, he depicted a Gaul on the coin. Smart move by his part. And here we have it, a small numismatic tour where we saw some lovely coins issued by the young Octavian, still getting used to the dangers of political life in Rome, coins illustrating his ascension to power, and finally, coins issued under the experienced, well-established Caesar Augustus, the first and most famous emperor of Rome. Do you have a coin of Augustus? Let us know in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Leave a like and consider subscribing if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.